so I'm BK, I'm Brandon Klevence, if you ever want to find me somewhere. What I'm going to do, I have like a maybe 3-part presentation for you guys. Usually I do these as like quick, like 7-minute things. The way I would open it up is that you can ask a question anytime, just raise your hand if you're confused, if I'm like babbling on, you don't understand me, or you're just like curious about something. I have some props up here that I'll pass around as they become relevant. I work at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Well, my backstory, I came out studying architecture, and over the past 3 years, it's kind of been a wild ride. I've changed schools, went through a lot of different stuff, found myself in Peru going into like a college in April this past year, right before I graduated. This is like a week before my senior thesis presentation, where I was being like driven into a college that looked like a prison outside of Lima, Peru. I've gotten into quite a few bike accidents at the library. I work at, I guess, I've worked at 15 different branches in the city, all over the city. And you kind of run into cars, other bikes, all that sort of stuff. Where I came into a field that's kind of similar to where you guys are at is I had a professor at UArts, Mike McAllister, and we worked with folks with disabilities on modifying their wheelchairs. So this right here is actually an arm that holds a camera. For this dude Mike right here, a stroke, he can't actually take pictures. And we modified like a guitar pedal here to basically actuate like a little finger that would allow him to take pictures when he's running around this thing. I worked in the shop, as I said. Started working at the Free Library within like 6 months of going to UArts, and I was also working at the Franklin Institute. So I helped prototype exhibits in the back. I worked on a kit that explained cell phones. It's in like a bunch of different museums. Kind of learned code and electronics on my own and with help from a lot of other people. And found myself at the library, which is the place that I'm still at today, which is really weird. You'd think I'd stay at the Franklin and find some other like prototyping place and go there and do code and electronics. But I actually found that I got a lot more back from working with kids, working with the public, doing workshops. This was my office for the first 6 months, me at the library. I was in a community center in a computer lab that was run by the library, and I had a fold-up table, a bunch of just like electronic components, LEDs, batteries, magnets, tape, magic markers, that sort of thing. And what I was doing is helping pilot and build a maker program at the library. Called MakerJawn. You saw the little logo there, you'll see it again. And basically I just had like groups of kids over one summer that would come in, kind of tinker with me, play around, do whatever they were interested in. I would show them how to solder, I would show them some hard skills. We would play with circuits and just kind of go wild. This was actually like magnets on a table, and you put the like a big magnet wand into the table and move things around, make things light up and make noise. We made mazes. We worked on a ton of different stuff, and this might be a little bit confusing, but this is just to kind of give you guys a sense of what's been going on at the library for the past 2 years. We work with kids from, I would say, age 4, and I always say they're still kids, but 23 is how old I am. And now in the past month, I guess, we've been working with adults. We got a $500,000 grant for the next 3 years to basically work with kids and adults within these spaces at the library. This is not at the library, actually, as I said. But we do public events. We work with different businesses in the city to kind of come up with different little interactives. So the kids that I was working with over the summer, we made like a thing in Scratch. If you know Scratch, it's like a web program with basic building block coding with kids and stuff like that that MIT made. We made like a way that you could paint a pizza with your hand, just drag your hand over everything, and it's done with a webcam. We also worked on, that's what it looks like, it's called Pizza Pink. We also worked on a thing called Gummy Miner, and it's basically you lick some ice cream, and through this thing called the Makey, which you guys may or may not know. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring the cable with me. You mined like gummy bears from this like interactive game that they created. So it's based off of Gold Miner. It's all through Scratch, so it's tongue extends, all that sort of stuff. And this is just like remix stuff. This is very shallow. What I'll talk about as I go through my work and stuff at the library is when you're working with the public, you have to make things as accessible as possible. If you're working with, say, code, or you're working with like teaching electronics or digital media, anything really, you have to assume that a person can't click a mouse. At the computer lab that I was at, we had a term called pizza, and that's how you taught someone how to double click. So the range of skills is absolutely crazy, especially when you're working with the public, from kids to adults. And I would tell you, the people that you'll see at the library from day to day, in my experience, are little kids coming to the grounds. And we'll talk about like my favorite ground from the 21st century in a little bit.
What does pizza mean again?
Pizza is just a way to time a double click. So you go pizza, and that's a double click. So we've worked with University of Pennsylvania, we've worked with UArts where I went, and a couple other like smaller little organizations in the area. This is one project that actually ended up going to Maker Faire. It's called Connected Messages. This, I would tell you, is like really, really cool. It's like embedding people's like stories and drawings, and then connecting them to the internet and making it so like you scan them, you can see them online, you can make them light up. And it was absolutely crazy the amount of work that went into this, but the fault at the end of the day, and this is going to be online, and that's fine, is that the only learning moment in this for the people that engaged in it in the public was positive and negative on an LED. So it's really cool, and it was like awesome that it was developed by Penn and we worked with them, but the only learning moment for people was like, oh, an LED, positive, negative, here's the battery, lights up. So this is like our first team of people. I'd say we had 5 people and a manager. I was one of the 5 people at the library. We've kind of grown and shrunk from like 23 to I think now 12 mentors is what we call them, maker mentors at the library. We got some stuff at Maker Faire. It's pretty cool. We do a lot of public events, as I said. And this is like a typical informal makerspace at the library. So that's what I'm really interested in. Right now we're doing stuff on the floor, which is a little bit different from this. This is like a back room. When you're on the floor, you're more or less just at a table surrounded by a bunch of books and other people who are job seeking. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is kind of just the intro. This is like an old presentation that I brought in for that. What I did, so I graduated in this past spring, graduated in May from college.
So did you get, so not in architecture?
Not in architecture, industrial design, yeah.
Okay.
I took a bunch of classes in the multimedia program at UArts. So I learned how to use like Arduino, I learned how to do a little bit of coding, web development, stuff like that. But what I was really interested in from my work at the Franklin, and also my work at the library, was teaching kids electronics, but also allowing people to take ownership of the electronics. So not just saying like, okay, positive and negative, I'm gonna light this thing up, but also having someone be able to say like, I made this thing and I know how to use it. So when we do those events, when we use say a Makey to make like a little interactive thing, or someone's just playing, they know how the thing works, how it's made, all that sort of stuff. And that stemmed from, and I kind of forget where this presentation goes, but it stemmed from the idea, or the acknowledgement that kids were breaking things and they knew how to solder them back together, in particular the Makey. But the Makey was also expensive, and it was a toy that you didn't really want to see break, because they were like $50 a pop. If you think we're buying like 10 of them, there you go. Like, you're just going to keep running through them. These kids aren't going to care. These adults aren't going to care. The teens are just going to throw them by the wayside. But if you can get them to make the stuff, then they'll geek out over it and they'll work with it. So again, you'll see kind of the same stuff. Kids are working with the Makey. This is the Makey kit again. They're making interactives. We have the little ice cream thing. This is me running around the city. And we're playing games. We're working with cardboard. This is, again, just to give you guys like a visual of what's happening in Philly. We're working with these like simple circuits, these like really low cost like electronics, just an LED and a battery and like a business card basically to teach people this stuff. I'm thinking like, how can I get kids to maybe do something a little bit more than that circuit, but actually like engage with all this other stuff they're learning, so Scratch, all that sort of stuff. So what I came up with was this idea that I was going to create Makeys. For less than $10 was my hope. They were going to be able to take them away and like go home with them because they'd be so cheap. And also they would be able to use them in projects at the library. So I just learned basically like I just was hacking together ways of creating Makeys and prototyping them at school. And I was working in a shop, we had a laser cutter, a vinyl cutter, and a 3D printer, and a CNC actually. And what I found through just knowing that the kids could play with circuits and making these circuits and simplifying myself was that, I'm just going to burn through this, I could vinyl cut them out of copper tape. So this is more of like a physical computing hardware-based project rather than a web development project, but you can kind of go along the same track in terms of bringing it into the library and running around with it and just kind of developing it and bringing in prototypes as you go and working with the public. And what I was realizing is kids were able to play with the copper tape, make circuits, light up LEDs. But how could I get them to go from that simple switch to creating what I was calling the Makey at the time? And I decided it could be like a sticker, it can be a simple circuit, it'll be a Makey, it could be in a notebook. I'm obsessed with passports and notebooks, but this thing. And that's really it. This is like the end of this presentation. What I ended up getting was a Makey that costs $1.50. And that little project took me to Peru, and I was able to demonstrate it in Peru at like a college down there. And it's been a pretty wild ride since then at the library. This is again just about me, not necessarily a free library.
So was this part of your program and part of your...
This is my capstone, yeah.
Gotcha.
So this is my capstone project. I was tasked with a project that I needed to do in one semester. I was allowed to do a little research the semester before, but I had 5 weeks to actually like make this thing and put it in action. So you're seeing more of the same, more of the same, more of the same.
So your capstone can take you to Peru, is the takeaway
yes.
here.
This project that you do now can take you anywhere, depending upon what you do with it and how you take advantage of it. So this is the shop at UArts. So this is where I prototype stuff, use the vinyl cutter, all that sort of stuff. This was kind of just the iteration in circuits and development that I did and simplification over that 5 weeks. This is me just taking a prototype in and seeing how like a group of kids interacted with it, and she's wearing glasses. She just photoshopped them.
So when you were working on, when you were doing this and getting a user testing with the kids, where were the kids? Where'd you get the kids?
So this is up in the Kensington branch, which we're still at. So this is an after-school kind of drop-in makerspace, basically. It's developed since I was there. I've moved around all of the branches, I would say. This space now is a mix between after-school homework help and drop-in studio days. So what will happen is on a typical day, a kid will come in, they will have some homework from school, they will work on their worksheets with like a team tutor, is what I would say. They're called TLAs, Team Library Associates. They're almost like volunteers. And then after they've done that homework, or if they don't feel like doing it, they'll come blow off steam in the back. And that can be them running around. And if you look up Mimi Ito, if you've never really heard of Mimi Ito, maybe not. She has 3 ways of gauging interest in programs. And you have hanging out, messing around, and geeking out. So in this picture in particular, you can see that you have like 2 kids that are kind of messing around. Maybe this girl's geeking out. I don't remember if she was or not. And then you have this kid who's kind of hanging out. He was also one of my like volunteers or like interns, whatever you want to call them. Jacob was just kind of hanging out. But that's like how you can gauge interest in this sort of thing, and this was just an after-school experience, whereas this is us kind of just having an event where we're showing off what we're able to do. And I think these two girls are actually from Penn. But what you're able to get, if you prototype this thing and you put it in people's hands, whatever it is you make in your project, you're able to have them play Minecraft or make other things. That's pizza paint from a while ago. But I'm just kind of explaining to you guys that like your project can go anywhere. It can be hardware, software, but the goal at the end of the day is to make it as accessible as possible. So this right here went from that crazy complex thing with a lot of soldering to just one of these little AT-Tiny's and as minimal as I could get on the rest of the hardware. This thing could probably kill a USB port, but I don't really care. With regards to what's currently going on at the library, and I'm sorry if this is kind of like a scattering presentation, but I'll walk you through. I think we can do it on time.
When you say kill a USB
It
port,
would burn out a USB port probably because it would overvolt the port. There's usually like power protection on your devices, so when you plug in like a USB cable, it only draws a certain amount of electricity. But say if that piece of paper, so this is a little makey. If you were to fold it or kind of cross some wires, you could actually burn the USB port out, which means that if you were just to plug something else in.
have you done that before?
It turns off, like the kids, so more into that project, the kids found out that they could plug in just the cables and they could cross the wires and they could turn off the computers in the library. This is one of the kind of the fun moments of this project. So I had this like group of kids at Kensington and another branch which we're still working in, Lily and Morera, that would actually like cut the cables on like one of these USB cords, and then they would cross just the power and I think the communication line, and they would just like walk up to a computer where their friend was at, and they would plug in and the computer would shut down. And the thing that was really devious about this is at the library, I think the kids' library card, so if you're under 12, you only get 30 minutes every day to go online. So they're always asking me for my card, they're like, you get an hour, you're not even using it. Like, come on, dude. But they would go up to their friends and be like, you can't use the computer anymore, because I just crashed it and your time's up. Which was a lot of fun to watch.
Have a nice day.
Yeah. So this presentation here is more or less what's going on right now. So forget about my little project and think about, we're working in 3 library branches now. We're working with adults, and we're working with teens, and we're working with kids after school. So adult programming happens anytime between 10 o'clock when the library opens and 3 o'clock. Sometimes it'll cross over, and eventually we're looking to have it cross over with the after-school programs that kids have. Typically in a space, you'll see like construction paper, magic markers, scissors, glue, maybe a sewing machine, most likely an iPad, and maybe 1 laptop, so maybe 1 MacBook Pro. But it's kind of, every time we move into different spaces, we stretch ourselves thin, so usually we have to share the tools that we have. So this is Rodriguez branch. This is down, all these branches are in North Philly that I'm going to be talking about. So we're talking about like underserved, low-income communities. Adults are most likely at the library as job seekers. Kids are there after school because they just need a place to go. And also homework help is very nice. So this is Lauren, she's one of our maker mentors. This is just a typical after-school scenario. I think this was in the fall. And they're actually working on making like little robots. They're called art dots. So what they'll do is they'll dip Q-tips in paint, they'll glue them or tape them to a motor, and then they'll put a 9-volt battery up to the motor, and then they'll spin around and make little like squiggly lines on the table. Again, just a simple intro to the electronic circuit, excuse me. This is kind of the aftermath of that sort of programmer's workshop that you would see. We also do stuff with copper tape circuits, which you can kind of see with my project. We do e-textiles. We've tried getting into website stuff with helping people make websites for small businesses, but it's slowly getting off the ground. This is more makey stuff. A lot of cardboard and paint. Kids love painting. That's a team right there. And then we also do some outdoor activities. Over the summer we were able to start a garden, we did terrariums, we do weaving. Again, this is just a general overview. These are some of our mentors working on like e-textile stuff. And this is the garden. Squishy circuits is kind of like a bread and butter activity, so Play-Doh conducts electricity. Pretzels conduct electricity, kind of, for the makey at least. And stop motion, which is an activity that's bridged kids and adults fairly nicely, so they can work together on a similar activity, either with Play-Doh or like cutting things out. We do a lot of movies and paper mache. So we have a few videos online. If you go to YouTube and look at MakerJawn, we have a couple movies that are like spoofs of Where the Wild Things Are. We have a crazy like alien zombie movie, and I think they just made a winter movie as well. These are those movies. And then we have a lot of green screen use, which is fun. So over the summer, we did a lot with digital badging. We had about like 65 teens working on making digital badges for middle schoolers. And we kind of got obsessed with that passport or book idea, as I was telling you. And we were trying to see whether or not we could get them to develop activities for kids to engage in their library community and make things for the library community. Whether it was like creative, working in teams, building the quote-unquote 21st century skills of like collaboration, or independent work, all that sort of stuff. And basically, what happened from that was we had this general idea and a kind of sketch of a badging program, but it never really works out because it's impossible to implement, where you could have kids completing tasks. So say they act out a play, they read a book, they have a debate, they work in a team, they kind of talk to people in their community and interview them, and document all of this in kind of a notebook. And with one of our mentors, they would get badged in completing these tasks. And from that, it would be acknowledged that they're learning these things in an informal space. So they're learning how to use a camera, how to edit film, how to like bind a book, how to work in a team. Like that you can acknowledge that they're collaborating with other kids, or you can acknowledge that they're doing all of this kind of like public work where they're adding to their community, building confidence in themselves, and public speaking and the like. So we used this crazy thing called BadgeOS. It's through WordPress. It's really crappy. To make this badging platform, and you can actually badge the kids, but the system itself and the amount of time we had to work on this project, it didn't work out. This was another 5-week project, but it didn't work out so well. But the fact that we actually kind of got a working prototype was pretty cool. And we had some kids, they made a music video. I don't have that music video on there right now, but it's online again. And this is where you get into my work again, but in making things accessible. So I was asked by the Maker Education Initiative and Intel to work on like this Arduino board called the Intel Galileo and try to get it in the hands of kids. And through a web IDE, so like a development environment called Williadrin, I was able to work with kids and get them to make a board that lit up when you sent a text to it. And it was all through, and you can't really see it, like a building block language. So similar to Scratch. And this is where, if you're working on a project and you want people to learn things and making it accessible, you'll definitely have to guide them and work with them directly, but you also need to have the simplest interface ever. You can't show someone code and expect them to learn it day one, but you can kind of show them how to snap blocks together, and then they can start tinkering with it. So you have to have like simplicity and kind of this ability to fail in everything that you do. We do a lot of stop motion, as I said, and it's really nice because it's just Play-Doh. I've gotten a lot of cookie cutters. My mom used to be a toy designer, so I have like a massive stack of cookie cutters that I have at my disposal. And what I've been interested in doing as of late, in the past month I guess, is getting the adults that I'm working with the tools that I was using last year. So 3D printers and vinyl cutters in particular, because they're super portable. This is my vinyl cutter, and we're cutting out hearts for a stop motion film. It's kind of still in the works. I think she was about to kind of cut out a butterfly. We just pull stuff from the internet and trace it and cut it out. At another branch, Cecil B. Moore, we're working on an activity which actually should be happening right now, where we have a group of first graders that come in once a week, and we're doing a Valentine's activity with them this week. We're reading a book, I forget what it's called, but it's all about different animals made out of hearts. So they have like clams, owls, bees, frogs, and we're showing them how the vinyl cutter works and cutting out hearts on the fly as they make Valentines for each other. And something that I've started doing, and as I said a little bit earlier, my favorite 21st century grandma, she's been borrowing the cookie cutters from the library. We've been lending out tools to her, basically. And what I've found, and I've been working with, is this processing sketch that someone made where you can just kind of trace out the cookie cutter, and it'll turn it into a 3D printable object. It'll turn it into an object that you can then slice up and cut. So we've been making stuff with the kids, which turns into just like Naruto objects, and then stuff with Carla, my 21st century grandma, which is more or less ways that she can cut out pancakes for her grandson. So it's kind of this interesting like genesis of 3D printing at the Free Library, where it's all from this grandma wanting to make stuff for her grandson, which is kind of cool. And that's it. That was a lot of stuff. But do you guys have any questions?
So, how often do these kids come by, and how often are you running the makers?
So the kids programs, think of it two different ways. We have the adult stuff and the kids stuff right now. Maybe in a year they'll combine together. The adult stuff happens every day. It's kind of different, a different schedule at the branches. But I would say we're at one branch from 10 o'clock in the morning until 12, and then another branch from about like 1 until 3. So we're at 2 branches a day, morning or afternoon. The kids programs happen every day. Some branches take off Monday, some branches take off Friday, but they happen 4 days a week, some 5, and they're from, usually kids start coming in around 3:30 to 6 o'clock. So at least 3 hours a day, every day, and then 3 different branches.
And so the scope of each of these projects then is atomic to one session, or the kids come in and work on it, and can they work on it again the next day?
So it depends. So stuff like the 3D printer or the vinyl cutter, it'll move from branch to branch, the tool itself. So it might be at one branch for a week, and then it'll move to the next branch. So it does it is atomic to one branch rather than one session. With the adult stuff, it's more or less like participant driven. That's what we really strive for. So it's whatever they want to work on. So a lot of the stop motion stuff revolves around adults wanting to send stuff to their family that's incarcerated, because they can just email them like an animated GIF or a video. Whereas the kids, they just want to like make something. So it depends. I mean, there are, I would say, iPads at every branch but one. So that's accessible, and there are computers at every branch. So anything that's like digital content, you can pretty much do. The physical making, it depends.
Is there unlimited access to the 3D printers, or is that
What's up? Do they have unlimited access? Or?
Can you just walk in these 3D
So it's when we're there, basically, right now. That's been a lot of talk with libraries across the country, is like, what are your 3D printer like rules, and like how does access work? A lot of places limit you to how much you print. I haven't done it yet because we're so new to it and just playing it out. And I'm also, because we're making tools that we're blending, I'm just kind of letting the floodgates open and saying we can print as much as we want, because it's a difference between printing something from yourself and taking it home and printing something at the library and keeping it in the library system. So currently it's whenever I'm there, or I guess there's 2 other people that I'm starting to train when they're around. They'll be able to run the printer, so it'll probably be available 3 times a week, once or twice in the morning, and then one day in the afternoon for kids. And as long as it's something that stays in the library, I would say there's no limit. But once people start really kind of building up their skills, and they understand how to model something, or they find something online that they want to print for themselves, that's when we say, like, okay, this is like your 1 print month, or your 1 print like every 2 weeks or something like that, and maybe start some sort of charging system. Chicago Public Library ran out of funds in the summer, I think, at one point, for their makerspace, and had to start charging way more than they were charging for like a year or 2, because they subsidized their prints.
Yeah, subsequent drop in.
I don't know. I haven't been there since the summer. I would assume no, but I'm sure that the workshops changed. I'm sure that like they were printing out a lot of things and super excited about like printing out the same little MakerBot guy that they printed out like 500 times. And that's probably dropped to like, okay, we actually have to like print something that is meaningful and worth the time and the material and the money.
What impressed you the most, or surprised you the most about like working with kids in the technology area?
The moment of the USB. That was like, it was one of those moments where you're just like, okay, like they're really understanding like something's going on here. It's not just like, okay, I saw this thing together and it's gonna do this thing great. They were also super interested in blowing up LEDs on it. So they would like put an LED on the circuit while it was plugged in, and then they would watch it pop, and it would smell really bad in the room. And they'd just like, you'd just watch it go on, and you watch it fizzle out and pop, and they'd just be like, whoa, whoa! And what came out of that, that play and that kind of destruction, was 2 of the kids that were on there earlier. They ended up figuring out finally where to put an LED and not have it blow up. And it was kind of a bug in my code, I guess. It made the LED blink when the makey input was on it, dropped the current. So they hacked a way to make it so that, just like the makey, when you make an input, it blinks on the thing that I helped create. They had an LED blink, and that was not prompted by them. So that was like one of kind of the surprising, unexpected, like, whoa, like they're actually understanding what's kind of going on without understanding the full thing.
When you were doing the vinyl cutouts, were you using library materials from the other part of the library, like storybooks or whatnot, to get that?
Yeah, so
crossover.
Yeah, with the heart stuff, we actually, that was like one of the first or second times that we had actually found a book that gave us a project, and that was kind of through me talking with a librarian and being like, we don't have anything for Valentine's Day. And we've really been trying to push this idea of like a book related to the project. It's something that doesn't always happen. With the movies, it's a lot easier, because like, as I said, you have Where the Wild Things Are, and then you have our knockoff movie spoof of Where the Wild Things Are. So you have a book to the project. But it's really hard to do overall. Like, you could say with the 3D printer stuff in Naruto, we have a ton of Naruto at each library. So the teens are obviously like reading manga, whatever you want to call it. And they're able to actually like make a physical artifact out of that book. But that's something that you would say happens after the fact.
Right.
If you were to list your top best investments in equipment, what would they be?
Magic markers. I wouldn't say LEDs and batteries because like they're like a one-time deal. Magic markers, colored paper, and probably an iPad, but I don't want to say that. I'm going to say an iPad, but I don't want to say it, because an iPad can be a device for making things, but it almost always turns into a device for consuming media, whether it's a game or something like that, which is what the library is for. Yeah, people get really distracted by it.
But you could also use it for iStop motion, I saw.
iStop motion, yeah, iStop motion, getting online.
Can I ask that question about not just hardware, but in terms of activities? You mentioned Scratch, you mentioned Makey. Are there some sort of no-brainer kinds of things that really work?
With software, or
yeah, like what are your favorite kinds of things that you like to do?
my favorite kind of things that I like to do right now is this cookie cutter thing, because it's literally point and click stuff in the software. So it's just kind of like dragging and dropping nodes.
And that's with the 3D printer.
Yeah, and it's just software based. So it's like you kind of make the outline of what you want, and then it does everything else for you. And the amount of return on that is pretty awesome.
Do you have a favorite brand of 3D printer?
No. Any 3D printer, the cheapest one. We built a rep, but it stinks. I worked with a gigantic dimension printer at school. That thing also stunk. We have a knockoff Chinese printer called a FlashForge. That's the best one.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, it's the best one I've worked with so far. But there's another part of that story, which is a lot of people are just like, let's get this 3D printer and plop it down in the space. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have a 3D printer and we're going to make stuff. And that like goes back to what I was saying about Chicago. They're just making tchotchke stuff. It doesn't matter. It goes out the door. It never comes back. But they're happy about it, which is cool. They did a project. They printed stuff. But when you get stuff going on that builds back into the community, creates something new at the library, then you kind of have that like golden moment that you're looking for in a project. And we bought that printer when we first started, I would say. So 2 years ago. We bought that printer 2 years ago, and maybe a year and a half ago, and we haven't used it till now, in public. We just had it sitting in the basement, because we didn't really have a good project for it.
So it took a cookie cutter to do it.
Yep, and a cool grandma.
And a cool grandma.
Yeah.
I find like people that come in are like the same people over and over again, or you find like people that come in different.
Yeah, so a lot of people are regulars. A lot of people have, and this is something that would be interesting for you guys to think about, a lot of people looking for jobs. And the mix between people looking for jobs and coming to our program regularly is we love them coming in, but we know that it's like the clock's ticking down until they're going to get a job, and they're no longer going to be able to come in during our hours. But we do try to help them as much as possible and push them and guide them to be focused on getting a job. Like Carla, the awesome grandma, she has a hearing disability, and she also has a daughter with a hearing disability. I don't really want to call it a disability, but she hasn't had a job in something like 33 years. She's 44. She hasn't had a job since, what, she was 12, 13, I don't know. And she's going to ITT Tech, so she's finally stopped coming in every day. And hopefully she'll get a job. She knows how to fix computers and stuff like that.
What's like the kind of process that people go through and look for a job in the library? They just go to the computer?
They go to the computer and go online. What we've tried to start doing is get them connected with people. I have a friend, like a coworker, who's like, let's get them on LinkedIn. That doesn't always really work. It gets them like an online presence that's different from Facebook. But what we've been doing is trying to kind of like get them to either cold call people or will help them cold call people. Rather than just like go on Walmart's website and apply for a job and hope they hear back and go through the great machine. yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I wanted to say something else too, but, about regulars, but I forget what it was.
One of the things that you're bringing up is that, and we have a center in our library too, and I didn't realize, like right now taxes are a big deal, and people come in and use the library for tax. Now it doesn't say H&R Block on the front of the library, but the library becomes, and all of a sudden the library, Sean has got to become fluent in what a 1099 and a whatever, and guide people. And it might be helping people get on LinkedIn. It sounds like employment and
what I was going to say on top of employment for regulars is actually you'll find when you build rapport with people, so it's like the key in like participatory design. You build rapport, you make a connection with someone, you kind of get into their life a little bit, and that's what I really learned when I was doing that stuff with the guy and the camera on the wheelchair. It's like really getting into people's lives, sharing stuff, getting to know them and what their needs are and what they want to do. You'll actually find that after you're like around someone for say a week maybe, like little mysterious things will pop up in conversation, and that'll spark something that either is awesome or completely unexpected. And in, I would say 2 or 3 of our branches, we have like, people have good days and bad days, and we as mentors, maker mentors, play a fine line between like this person that's guiding them through a creative project, like a coach to be like, come on, like find a job. Let's like push you out the door and get you going someplace cool. But also like social worker. So you have people that dealt with child abuse, deal with abuse now, are like living for free at their like boyfriend's mom's house, and they're kind of stuck in this hole. And the only resource we have for that, and we have to definitely kind of like put our foot down, draw a line, and I forget what the other word is, but say like, I can't be your social worker, but here's this sheet of paper that has all these different resources on it. So we have a project home resource, which I can actually share out to you guys if you want, which is basically like, here are all places to go if you need help, or you want to do something, or you're looking for something. Because that's an issue that I would say everybody deals with. And right now, everybody's jobs are kind of in a gray area. So a librarian could be helping out with resumes, they could be helping a kid with his homework, his or her homework. We could be doing the same thing. I could help someone find a book, you never know.
yeah, I think that I hope what you're taking from that is when people show you a little bit of their lives, you can use that in a lot of different ways, and you can become sort of a teacher or a mentor or a helper, social worker, and all these things start to bubble up. And I know Sean, library director who was here before, you start to develop sort of a sense for when there's danger and when you need to call the authorities, or there might be a kid at home that you know is being abused, or there's a lot of these kinds of issues that really kind of require special training. But it can be.
I'm getting trained on how to be a mandated reporter, I guess, in the next week or so, because as of the first of this year, if I hear anything or see anything, I think including outside of the library, just in my day-to-day life, because I'm a library employee and I work with kids, I have to report child abuse if I see it or smell it or kind of think it's...
Because if you don't report it,
then it's on me. And that is a very interesting and very confusing situation to be in right now, because there's so much jargon and nonsense that they put on the internet, and it's not an easy system to deal with. They're trying to do it, but it's the government, and I would tell you, even like kind of locally at your like library branch, everything's cloudy and bureaucratic and nonsensical. And it's hard to deal with that. Something that I don't know if the other Sean, if he talked about it at all.
yeah, and also teachers have to do that too. You also need to pass a background check if you're going to work with children and kids, or you should. And that's another thing that you have to be very careful about.
You guys, if you wanted to, you would be more than welcome to work with the adults that we have and anybody over 18. But you do need like a child line, which is like state child abuse clearance, and I believe an FBI clearance to work with kids currently.
It costs $100. You have to be fingerprinted. And, yeah.
So, two-part question, and then I think we need to kind of start wrapping up. So this program, MakerJawn program, is this an experiment by the Philadelphia Public Library?
So it's an experiment. I used to call it a working group. The best way to put it is we're just like we're a bunch of artists now, I would say. I don't call myself an artist necessarily, but we're a bunch of people that work at the library and are doing these makerspace type things. And we were definitely in our first year in this crazy growth period. And like, okay, let's keep building, let's keep building, let's keep building. And the experiment got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's starting to shrink. And it's also because we got that big grant to go for another 3 years, and we kind of have to legitimize ourselves a bit more in doing that. So I'd say right now, with staff change, like a different manager, with a lot of different stuff, it's becoming more legit, and it's also losing a lot of its like, I don't know what quality to call it, but like it's losing a lot of its luster maybe.
An edge.
Yeah, an edge.
Grittiness.
And that is, I would say, because smack dab in the middle of MakerJawn now is quite a bit of the bureaucracy that's rampant in the library. So it's like it's hard to work at the library in this sort of small microcosm like project experiment. I would say. So we are experimenting. Yeah.
So, and where I was going with that is, how does this then fit? So if it's an experiment to see how this could unfold in the future of that particular library system, what do you, based on your experience, what do you see the future hold for this?
So, I went to Chicago Public Library this summer, and I was talking to people about programs at Chicago Public, and they were talking about the free library, and they were like, oh, you have this like awesome STEM programming going on. We really love what you're doing. Like your after-school program is like phenomenal, and that's a completely other thing at the free library. So we have a thing called LEAP, which is like an enrichment program for kids. It's the after-school homework help. They also get grants to do STEM programming, so that is just someone coming in for a day and doing a quick workshop. It's not static or it's not like a continual thing like what we have going on. I hate it because it's just like some work study student that comes in with like a binder full of stuff from like Temple that never connected or seen these kids before, and they're like, okay, we're going to learn about like biology today, and they go through like a one-off workshop. What I see going further is the model that we've kind of created and are working with right now, that being the after-school program, that like LEAP program that's going on at the free library. The thing that everybody else is like, oh, this is awesome, you have this stuff going on. I see what we're doing replacing what's going on at the library right now. It's already happening in that one branch that I was talking about. We have a maker that's doing homework help. And as soon as the kids are done turning around and using all these like maker activities, all this stuff that we've kind of built up, to still engage the kids after they've gotten their homework help. So it's starting to happen. It'll take a really long time, and it's also hoping that all the people in the gigantic system at the library are like, oh, like, we really like this thing. Maybe we're gonna like take a couple more chunks of you and bring you into the library. Because the MakerJawn initiative has very much been like this fringe thing and this like test that people have acknowledged, and they've known that we've been around, and we've been paid by the city to work at the library, but now it's slowly starting to get like bought into and taken over. Was it assimilated? Will be assimilated by the free library at some point. Probably by the end of the 3 years of the grant that we're going to help that'll happen.
So you made earlier an interesting comment. You said we're creating, and I think this is related to the iPod or the iPad, where you can also use it to consume the media, and you said, which is what libraries are supposed to do.
Yeah.
So do you see this creating and becoming something that you're supposed to do at a library as well, or will libraries always be something that people are supposed to consume?
So there's this whole idea in Denmark right now. If you look up Aarhus library system, they're redesigning a bunch of libraries, and they have library transformers. They're like people kind of like us that like walk into libraries and they're like, we're not gonna have any books, we're gonna just make this like a public space to work on things, kind of like a co-working space or something like that. And that's definitely the model elsewhere, not here. I hope it comes this way in some shape or form, but I think the spaces are just not built for that yet. And the Free Library actually has gotten a ton of money in the past year to redevelop their libraries. So we'll see what happens in a couple of the branches. The spaces won't be used for that in North Philadelphia where I work though. I have a feeling it'll still be a place to go to look for a job, get online, stay warm, that sort of thing. Depends on the location and like the context and the people around in the community.
Let me ask this one final question. About 4 years ago, you said you're 22?
I'm 23.
23. So you're not really an older person or gray-haired, or like Mark and I. Just 5 years ago, you were sitting in a classroom like this. Do you have any advice for these guys as to something that, if you could go back in time, maybe what is, you know, what?
So I go back to UArts a lot and like hang out in the shop because I help do a lot of stuff there. So I can just walk in and cut stuff and print stuff and use the shop and take materials. And I always give advice to people that are in like sophomore and junior year. And that is like, start looking for an internship now because you don't have to get paid right now. And you can also fail and learn stuff right now. Whereas like, you know, I'd say in your junior year, you don't really have the time to do that because you should be thinking about actually like applying for jobs. So that by the time you're doing a capstone or a thesis or something, or thinking about getting out of school, you can already kind of have something lined up. A lot of people in my year are still kind of floundering, so I'd say maybe like 4 of us out of 12 or 13 of us, or there's more than that actually, there's like 15 of us, have successfully gotten jobs and are doing things we like to do. I'm still applying for jobs everywhere, I tell you. Like I'm not stuck to one place. And definitely try to get as much experience as you can outside of school now. So that once you get to senior year, you can have the 2 to 3 years of experience that every job's going to require of you. And then you're more marketable.
Is it also smart to learn like Unity or specific skills like Arduino, and so that?
Yeah, I would say learn to tinker with a lot of things. Don't put your hands in too many pots because then it'll get confusing. But like, test things, find out what you like and you don't like now, because again, you won't have the time to do that towards the end of school. And that's kind of what I did. Like I went to school for architecture, found out I really like 3D modeling. I was working in like Maya and like a bunch of Autodesk stuff, and then I was like, oh, there's this thing called Grasshopper. I can do like parametric architecture, sweet. And then I found out about Arduino, and I was like, okay, I'm done with architecture. I'm done. Like I need to find something else. And that was me throwing away 3 years of experience. I didn't throw it away. I learned a bunch of stuff, and I was able to take those skills and use them elsewhere. But I was throwing away. Basically, I had another 2 years, and I could have had like a bachelor's of architecture. I could have been like I could be a licensed architect right now, you know, or in a year maybe. But definitely just do a bunch of stuff.
And blow up LEDs?
Yeah, blow up LEDs. Don't be afraid to walk out of a job. I used to, it's horrible advice, but I walked out of a job at the Apple Store in downtown Philadelphia. I walked out of the Franklin Institute because they weren't paying me and they were trying to extend my internship. I was a research assistant at Penn, like around the same time, up until like this past summer, and I walked out of that job. So it's bad advice, don't do it because you're burning bridges, but make sure you have like allies, make sure you're working outside of school to like get connections, get experience, so that once you get out, like you have like a solid portfolio and rapport with other people in a field. It may not be what you want to do, but definitely that's what the 4 of us that have good jobs did, and it's worked out pretty good.
Good advice.
And also, don't be afraid to ask your parents for frequent flyer miles to go to Peru. It's awesome. That's how I got down there. It was nutty. And my Spanish is complete crap. I thought I was going to die on multiple occasions. It was really, it was scary, but it was fun.
Well, thanks for coming in.